welcome to Hack Housing. Yeah, Civic Hall. There we go. This is a very, very exciting event, and we'll talk a little bit why that is in a second. As I said, I'm Ben. I run a little blog called Icon New York. And I've got a lot of my fascinations with taking data, civic data, and using it to kind of make our city a better place to live. And so when I heard about the opportunity to be involved in today's event, I was like, wow, this is a great fit for that. What's also really exciting about it is that it's kind of unique in that we're mixing things up. A lot of the time you have sort of these, hackathons, and then you have these sort of conferences. And a lot of the time we're not seeing the type of interaction we want to see. And today we're going to see things from many sides of the equation here. When it comes to displacement and housing in New York, it's obviously no single solution. We're going to see everything from hear from sort of tenant organizations, so all the way down to nonprofits and someone who, a civic technologist who's in technology. And then we're going to hear some presentations, and at the end, we'll have a larger discussion among the panelists and then all of you to sort of start to brainstorm and come up with new ways how everyone can be kind of collaborative here. So, as I said, it's a very unique environment. It's very exciting to see this arranged by Civic Hall, Rentlogic, and the Mayor's Community Affairs Unit. So, applause for all of them. That's awesome. I think it's going over to Jonathan to say a few words.
All right. Well, welcome back.
Oh, that was what?
That was a very enlightening hour that we just had. We're seeing viewpoints from many ends of the spectrum, as we said. So the way this is going to work is we'll kind of discuss for maybe half the time over the next 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up and take a broader discussion with the audience for the 15 minutes after that, and then we'll wrap up. So we don't have a ton of time, but I'll start. Part of the high level view of the day is to think about how to kind of draw connections. I'm going to start with Noel, and then I want other people to kind of go from there, because what struck me was your slide with all the different organizations. So I'm going to start with you and say, how did you go from sort of building pitching an app and building sort of a tech platform to partnering with so many nonprofits in the space? What led you there? And then from that, I want to also hear from other people what types of other connections might be inspired from today or more general that they're looking for. So we'll start with you. Tell us a little about that process.
Yeah. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. So my co-founder William, when he started Heatseek, he was working late one night in a building that didn't heat. They didn't heat the building after hours. It was really cold, and he's a developer, so he was like, I wonder how cold it actually is in here. And so he set up a temperature sensor to connect to the internet. Super simple. That was where the idea for Heatseek came from. But what happened after that is he wrote a really quick blog post just saying, here's what I did, here's how I built it. It was mostly meant for developers, but a friend of his, who is a developer, said, hey, I read your blog post, and my mom is a social worker, and she has this client in the Bronx who never has heat in his apartment. He's disabled. She's trying to find a way to help him get his heat restored, but it's difficult for him to keep a heat log. If you're looking for a user, maybe we could put a sensor in his apartment and see what it captures. And so that was our first user, and I think that really informed our thinking around how we were going to connect with the tenants that we hoped to serve, which was, rather than trying to find them all ourselves, why not just connect with folks who are already connected to them? So that sort of became our MO. My background is in nonprofit work, and so I sort of slowly started to gather a list of community-based organizations that were doing tenant organizing in some of the neighborhoods that we had used the data to see that heat was a big problem in those neighborhoods. And I just started cold calling. And I said, I've got these temperature sensors. I think they might be useful to you. Would you like us to come out and install them in some people's apartments? So we worked with a small number of community organizations our first winter, and then from there, sort of word of mouth, and also we got connected to, as those tenants were working with community-based organizations, and we're connected to legal service providers, pro bono legal service providers. And then all of a sudden, we got connected to legal aid and legal services, and from there, it just sort of spread.
Right from the beginning, and it sounds like that first connection was kind of organic and not expected, but then it sort of led you in that direction to an impressive list of partner organizations. I'll go down to Murray. You gave us a little history of your background. I knew that you were also a photographer, right? And you built this Airbnb website, and now you see that it's been used by different things. Was that a surprise, or did you try to do things in order to get your data used, by more people? How, were you reaching out to government officials yourself, or was it once again more organic? How did that happen?
So in the beginning, I was very aware of trying to release something that a lot of people would get value from. So everyone lives in their own neighborhood in New York City, and they're very interested about housing in the neighborhood. So it's very important for me to make sure that you could run a story about your own neighborhood. So I think that was one part of it that I thought about, making it very visually interesting, something that you would share with other people.
Because once it's visual, you have a larger impact, right? By putting out some stats, maybe it's less, you have to travel less than telling a story that way.
I also was very aware of, because it was against a corporation, that I might get sued. So there are some avenues that I could have gotten sued. Basically, once you scrape data, you're breaching terms of use of websites, so there was that possibility. So my defense was to make sure that a lot of people saw it, became popular, so I was thinking about that. I do some community work in central Brooklyn, so I know community organizers there, so I reached out to them before I released, and I got them to spread the release with their network. There's also a coalition of housing advocates, elected officials. It's called Share Better, and I reached out to them just before I was about to release, and they helped me with some media connections. So they had an interview lined up. I think it was with USA Today, and so when I released a few days later, a profile came out like that. And then I used social media as well, and I think you picked it up pretty quickly, like within the first week. There's also a great civic, they call themselves civic hackers. It's called Beta or Beta NYC. And so when I was building the app, I went to a few meetings and met a few people, got some advice, but they also helped me spread the word. So if you're building any type of technology, or you want someone to get interested in your cause, I'd recommend trying to find meetup groups, civically minded people.
Well, I guess we're going down the line now. So, Rob, how does, I saw immediately the technological aspect of some of our speakers. Do you look to data and technology to help drive some of your decision making currently, or is it something you want to do more of, or where are you on the spectrum at
So right now we have a partnership with Cornell University. They send about 12 to 15 interns a semester to analyze all of our workshops that we do. So we help about 5,000 people a year in these events that we do. And then so we gather their income levels and family sizes, and we take that to track the income levels and the family sizes for the next year, so we can start advocating for the affordable housing that is showcasing in our workshops. What we want to do is how to put that data online, where we need them to help actually get that raw information that we have.
And what struck me was you have, to your right, somebody who's passionate about scraping data and information, and then you mentioned going from each individual website a year later, and I don't know, and you wonder whether at some point that could be an automated process for your organization as well, where
It sounds like we need to go on a date.
so interesting.
My partner will be happy to hear that. She's here.
Yeah, and as far as sort
She
of,
can come too.
there's a lot of web scraping and collection in the civic tech community. As mentioned, Beta NYC is a big place to start. So as an organization, if that's something that sounds hey, we want to put in these websites and keep pinging them automatically once a week to look for the site. That's not sort of science fiction. That's something that someone could actually build. So.
Does not make my staff job. We should do that, actually.
So we'll come back, I guess, down all the way to this side to Yale. You're using government public data, and you talk about expanding to every city, but not every city has as much of this interesting data out there as New York. Is that a challenge for you?
That's right. Yeah, it's a challenge, but typically you see better open data protocols and policy as cities get larger, and as cities get larger, those are the ones that have housing issues. And so for us, in the next couple of years, we're trying to be in the 10 most populated markets in North America, and they all already have fully deployed open data stuff. Some cities are better than others. It's funny because in Toronto, everyone says, "Oh, I wish we had data like New York has," and in New York, everyone says, "Oh, we need much better data." So it's, but yeah.
Cool, thank you. And Aaron, you mentioned using data analysis to find the buildings. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the Department of Finance, each year landlords have to report how much building income is coming in through all of their properties. So we look for irregularities with that.
Because those are all landlords or just for rent?
No, I think all landlords. So if you have a landlord who has a building where it's mostly rent stabilized and you're seeing these massive spikes, by definition something is wrong. Because rent stabilization is supposed to be incremental, manageable, affordable rent increases, so that's been instrumental. Another piece I just want to mention, and this is the most aggravating one to me, is there's something called a J51 tax benefit. This is essentially a benefit that requires landlords to rent stabilize all of their units if they're receiving it for renovating their building. This is something that DHCR could easily enforce right now because it's binary, right? You can create a list of all of the addresses of every single J51 building and then create a column for percentage of rent stabilized units, and anything under 100% should be immediately investigated because it's illegal. Anyone can do this. So
I've seen tax bills.
yes, John Krebs.
Yeah, John Krause.
Yep.
So that has that data actually.
It does, and you can get this as well from Department of Finance. But what John did that was incredible is he was able to get it all on one source. But it's incredible that this has not been investigated. That's what's funny when DHCR says we're going to look into it or investigate it further. You don't need to investigate it. You can do this from your couch while eating cheese doodles and watching TV, which is 2 columns. It's very simple. Just want to point that out. Yeah.
And so just to point out, so tax bills that YC has mentioned with John Krause, it was basically the issue of all these independent buildings. Every tax bill is actually public. If you want to go see any building, you can put it in the borough block lot, you can download a PDF and see the tax bills, right? But if you were to ask the city for all tax bills, they would say it would cost $50,000 to give that to you. So he wrote in, I don't know how many days, a web scraper, and it took many months of literally going on to the city's website with a computer and putting in every single borough block lot in the entire city, one at a time, downloading the PDF, and worked also with another civic technologist who now works for the Department of City Planning, Chris Wong. And they wrote a parser, and now that data is all available in a CSV file, and it's fascinating because it's the first look at some of our rent stabilization data at tax abatements around the city. So that's kind of an area where somebody builds something, but they don't necessarily know who it's for or what it's for, and then maybe it finds its way to an organization that was like, oh wow, we've been waiting for this forever, but it wasn't built with that knowledge. So I'm still curious, what was it? I mean,
I think it was built with that knowledge, but yeah, that's John. But Ziggy in the audience as well has a great map about J51 tax benefits as well. This has been instrumental in helping us target predatory landlords. And I think a lot of people don't know that you can actually use a data-driven approach to figuring this out, because unlike HPD, DHCR doesn't really have any kind of database, right? If you go to HPD, you can search how many open violations there are, and you'll know where they're located in the city. DHCR doesn't have that, so the tax sphere has been instrumental in that regard.
And how many of you have thought about reaching out to sort of, or have gone to sort of the civic tech community? I know you mentioned early on that there was some information coming there, and you're sort of a member of that by some of the work you're doing, but for those that are running organizations, have you thought about that as an avenue? Have you shown up at one of these tech meetups, or you already have a relationship with tech organizations that are ongoing? I'm curious, sort of, it's an open question for anyone that has comments there.
I can talk about that quickly. So, yes, Noel Delville at Beta NYC is incredible. He knows everything there is to know. I might be overselling it a little bit. I feel like he knows everything there is to know about the city's open data. He's very involved. He works with the Manhattan Borough President to get sort of up-and-coming data scientists to do work for community boards, which I think is fantastic. I know John. We work a little bit with some of his tax bill data, and Chris Wong, and Ziggy. We held a code sprint back in December. Got about 100 data scientists to come and work on some of the sort of data issues that we were working on with like the landlord lookup tool, trying to connect addresses to the LLCs, aggregate the LLCs for an individual owner. We're really interested in sort of the maintenance issues as a form of harassment, that then if you can track how that leads to the loss of affordable housing, you can start to say things about, these kind of like you were saying, the really one-off. People think that they're alone in having these issues, but if you can start to show patterns of abuse across an entire portfolio, that's where you can actually, hold someone accountable.
And on a personal level, I've sometimes done some work on issues, just exploring. I'm not an expert in some of the things I'm exploring, but I'm looking at affordable housing rates or other such things, and I kind of wander into different people's domain as I do that. And as I do analysis, I'm always, I'll write it up and I'll put it out there. But I never know who would be the right person to actually do something with this. Or maybe I should have done it slightly different had I known that there was an ask. Like if I know that there's an organization, if only I had X, I could do something. And if there was some sort of way to organize all that information, we can organize people looking for rooms in New York and people selling them. We should be able to organize organizations looking for specific work. Do you know of any sort of platforms like that? I know Beta NYC has acted as a middle organization somewhere, but have we seen any platforms for anything like that, or is that kind of an interesting thing that people would like to utilize?
I'd love to utilize that. I think right now it's all in Noel Delville's brain.
Awesome. So that was a little bit from our panelists. I'm going to open it up to all of you. You heard some great presentations. Do we have any sort of questions for anyone specifically? Step up to the mic so we can all hear you. Awesome.
Hi, thank you all so much. You might have already answered this question, Noel, but how did you get property access to install your centralized hub? I imagine building owners might not be that receptive to having that in their building.
Yeah, so we actually put the hub in one of the apartments, and so that's why it was so important for us to be able to connect to these community organizations that have relationships with tenants in individual apartments, because we don't put anything in the common space. We don't go through the landlord.
This is for Heat C. Have you had any of your data entered into an HP proceeding in housing court, and was it admissible, and did anyone dispute it?
So we were working really hard towards sort of that burden of proof. We wanted our data admitted as evidence in a trial, right? Because that's where your data gets admitted as evidence. And what we found is that all of the cases where we had connected to tenants, they were having these issues, they had really great data, they had a lawyer, they went to court, they all said. So it's almost not actually realistic for us to need to, we have written affidavits, we are ready to testify as soon as someone actually wants to take it to trial, but most of these cases settle out of court, or in court. And so what we're finding that's really useful is to for lawyers to be able to introduce the heat component into that settlement agreement, whereas before they had no way of proving it, so they could prove mold or whatever, and they knew that heat was an issue, but they couldn't integrate it into the settlement. Now they can, and we've seen, I think, I forget the number, but it was like 8 or 12 of the buildings that we worked in had settlements where heat was a component. The landlord pledged to provide heat. Sometimes the tenants are getting rent abatements because they can prove the lack of services that they were supposed to be receiving. And sometimes then, lawyers are able to come back on contempt charges if the landlord doesn't provide heat.
This is very popular. I like the Red series for the public, but I'm just curious, how helpful are government officials to you guys in the tech community when you're trying to get data for your projects versus us? Because I can tell you as journalists, it's great to fight for every little piece of data, and one of the biggest obstacles that I have personally come across is that there's a specific exception in the law against releasing any information that is collected by the DHCR pursuant to the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. So if they know which apartments are registered, they will not tell you on the FOIL. There's an FOIL request to the extent that even when I ask for information that's already public on the website, they will withhold it and they'll cite that specific exemption. So I'm just wondering if you all are having more luck with this.
I have not had a lot of luck. I think one of the biggest issues is I used to work in politics for a long time. It was a lot of fun. And my last position, I was the chief of staff for an assembly member, so I was able to experience this stuff at a state level. I think the problem is that our housing woes are not just housing issues, they're also campaign finance issues. And when 10% of all political contributions at a state level are coming from the Real Estate Board of New York, when things don't make sense, there's usually a paper trail. When you follow that paper trail, you find weird things. But data, unfortunately, is not always one of them. So I struggled with that as well.
Just following up on that, are there any sales information of lots of New York is public and rent information is not? Are there other municipalities where rentable information is public that we're aware of, or is that just sort of an assumption? Why is it that sales are considered public and rent is not?
So I believe it's Los Angeles, or it's either Los Angeles or Las Vegas, where they do have a database that will tell you if an apartment is rent stabilized or not. I can't tell you about the actual rental, histories and stuff, but I think that's a big, step forward that you can, work up to. We don't have anything close to that, right? That's why we give the text here.
Two quick questions. One, with your work with the in database for the apartments, can you put in your apartment now, like, are you looking for active information for people that are currently in apartments so that you can help with all the data in that sense?
Yeah, so right now you can leave a review and let people know what your apartment is like, and it lets you rate it based on management and how responsive they are. That doesn't actually affect the rating. The rating is entirely generated off public data because we want to keep it as official as possible. But once we have enough user-generated content, then we can analyze it in a whole different way and look for totally different patterns. And so we're working towards it. Once we have that, one of the issues with that is it's kind of considered hearsay. It's just what one tenant is saying about it, and even though it's probably true, but when you see, they're like Yelp reviews. When you see 10 people are saying kind of the same thing, and they're all logged in with different accounts and different names, then it definitely has some more truth to it. But the short answer is that we just need to get more of that user-collected data.
And then the question for Heatsink, has there been any conversation about getting this stuff set up in NYCHA buildings? Is that a possibility? Because I know that that's a major issue with heating, as we've heard in the news, recent years.
Yeah, so we were in some NYCHA buildings last year through working with Legal Services NYC. So it wasn't that we went to NYCHA and they said, yes, let's put these sensors all over our buildings. We were working with specific tenants who had a case. We would love to work with them. One of the things that's great about our sensors is it provides you with a steady stream of temperature information so that you can figure out where in my portfolio are things not being heated correctly, or where do I need to replace the windows, where is there a draft, things like that. So there is this whole energy efficiency component to what we're doing as well. We are a staff of 3 people, so if someone wants to give us $1 million to build a bunch of sensors, we will put them all over NYCHA gladly. But in the meantime, we're sort of running some demonstration projects to demonstrate a couple of the ways that we think our data could be particularly useful. And so one of the things we're doing, actually, we started with HPE because their data is public, so we can look at complete data. NYCHA, the data is not public, so it's a little bit more difficult. We just sort of started with the low-hanging fruit. But we've been working with HPD. They've used some of our data. They've been receptive to what we're doing, and I think that if we can show them that we're really adding value to their work, they're open to that.
That's color. For those who are aware, NYCHA is not a city agency, and thus the open data legislation that covers city agencies does not necessarily cover NYCHA. So as you hear, there's sometimes difference between getting data from NYCHA and a city agency as a result of that sort of fact.
And I assume everyone knows, but NYCHA is the New York City Housing Authority. HPD is Housing Preservation and Development, the city agency that's tasked with enforcing the housing code.
Hi. No. Anyway, I'm a housing attorney at the Relate Society, so I think that's tenants and eviction proceedings took a while. Thank you for the shout out. I guess one thing that I would really encourage all of you to think about the work that they did that much here today is how to get this stuff in the hands of local tenants. I'll tell you that my clients, they don't even know their rights under rent stabilization, let alone the sort of tools that you guys are releasing. So, we try to just really encourage you to figure out how to do this, how to put this stuff in the hands of the people. It's even hard for me. I don't even know this stuff. The housing attorneys working in the city are so stovepiped in litigation. They don't know what kind of tools are out there. It's part of why I'm so glad to be here. So I guess maybe, if to make a question, what do you guys really think more about that? So what else would that's great. And then Aaron, I'd like to talk to you later on, just whatever. That's my unit that we maybe specifically have a mandate to find bad actors and bring affirmative cases against them. It sounds like we might be a partnership. I don't know if you're really working with us, but
Definitely. I know Judith Goldner was
okay,
incredible. Yeah. But to answer your question, I mean, what my organization is doing is we're making the legal process affordable, because when you work in large groups, you can incentivize law firms, nonprofit, legal organizations to take on cases that they wouldn't have otherwise taken on, on an individual basis. There's also advantages to working in groups, which is that there's something called a 4-year rule, a 4-year statute of limitations. And it's easier to pierce that when you're working in a large group, because if you can prove that there was fraud and there was willful intent, you can have the look back period farther than 4 years. So I would say that's what we're doing, is we're making lawyers accessible to low income communities.
Can I just say too, real quick, like the learning curve for community organizations to either hear about this technology or learn how to use it. On the tech side, the learning curve to figure out what's going on in the housing landscape, who the different community organizations are, which legal service provider, that's a very steep learning curve too. So I think it's not that there are all of these folks out there building tech and not thinking about where it's going to be used. They just are also struggling to find it, to find the communities that they want to impact.
It's a magic game.
Yeah, and it's just as difficult, I think, for both sides.
And then something at a high level that the administration has been thinking about, they have it's called the Open Data for All initiative that's sort of freshly launched. And that's how it's literally it's how do we take data and not make it sort of a subset of the city, but make it fully reliable. So that's a very big and difficult question, but one that the administration is also thinking about.
Hello. Rob, this question's for you. Basically, I know you mentioned a lot about Brooklyn, but does that organization extend beyond Brooklyn? Or I know that's kind of where your hub is.
So, hello? Yeah. So I'm a Brooklyn boy at heart, so I'm always in Brooklyn and Williamsburg, but we are New York City. We're in Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, and sometimes Staten Island, but mostly in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx. And the data that I pulled up today, we do it throughout New York City. So we can be very helpful when you come to that event on Tuesday nights. We'll pull up New York City's entire housing stock and affordable housing. So,
yeah. And Aaron, one quick question. Now, I know you mentioned that you're talking about bringing and bridging legal as well as kind of when you're actually attacking these, landlords. Does that just extend towards, when you're trying to attack them, or I guess I'm thinking in terms of like, if in fact, let's just say you're a tenant association or a block association, is there a way to sort of bring that sort of expertise? Because basically what we're trying to do is sort of leverage, a company that I'm actually starting, which basically deals with, rating your buildings and different things to that effect. But we're also talking about dealing with tenant associations, New York, NYCC, community organizations.
No, that's incredibly helpful, partnering with those organizations, because we don't have the capacity to go into every single building. So having those partnerships, explaining how to get, the rental histories and what we need to see, I can then take that from them, evaluate it, and try to find a home for their case, which is, what we've done a number of times. We actually have a tenant association president here today, and he was the one that brought me the rental histories, and now we're going to be filing a lawsuit in the next, few weeks. So absolutely, huge asset.
So I hate to do this, but we only have time for, I'm totally have time for one more question. Sorry, so we're gonna go back over here. Sorry for you guys, but we'll panel to be around for a few minutes afterwards, so please come up and ask your questions. Please, last question.
So hi, my name is Jenny. I'm part of a new team at HPD. So I'm glad you had a good experience with HPD. And we're actually tasked with doing what we call strategic preservation.
Ma'am, can you speak up a little bit, please?
So you can come over this side.
Yeah,
okay.
a microphone, yeah.
So I'm part of a new team at HPD, Department of Housing Preservation and Development, and we're tasked with doing what we call strategic preservation of existing affordable housing. We're actually looking into a lot of similar strategies that were mentioned tonight. So we're also doing a lot of portfolio searches, so it's interesting to hear how you do it. And I was actually curious how Rentlogic lists the owner, because as Aaron was mentioning, it's very time-consuming, very challenging to find out who the people and the companies are that are behind the LLCs. And I would love to find a way to make it less time-consuming and more effective.
So it's not perfect, but we're taking the registration contacts off the HPD open data, and then we're also looking at other things like the address of where they were registered, and there's some metadata that kind of gives clues to who owns what. It's almost impossible to pierce the corporate veil of any Delaware LLC, but you can kind of see some broad patterns. That's really the magic question, though, to figure out who's behind an LLC.
Thank you.
We also have a rather large volunteer contingent, and a couple of our volunteers coming out of the code sprint that we ran back in December got really interested in exactly that question and have taken on that project. We're doing it as volunteers, so it's a slow-moving project, but that's something we're super interested in and love to sort of throw a lot of smart people at it. And the other thing, quick plug, we run a Heat Seek meetup every other Wednesday at, if you go to meetup.com and search Heat Seek, it's just for volunteers. Anyone can come, you don't have to have worked with us before. Come hack on some of these projects, figure out what you're interested in, and we'll try to help support you with them.
Yeah, so this has been, let's first have a round of applause for all of our presenters. I was going to as much as I did and learned as much as I did. We saw some connections being made, some people thinking about how they might be able to utilize other people's interests, and that's great. We solved the connection problem between civic tech and nonprofits. No, but this is actually the first event that I've seen, this kind, where you're kind of putting a bunch of people in a room, and that's pretty amazing. So it was really fun to be a part of it. I hope you see it replicates in other ways. Speaking of doing it again, you guys want to quick closing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first, thank you. Thank you for Gail Fox, who was a catalyst for this idea. Thank you for Ben for being here today and for all the amazing panelists. So you will hear from us at the Mayor's Community Affairs Unit. We interface and liaise with all the city agencies, and our goal is that this is not a one-off, but there will be continuous engagement. So please, you can follow us at Mayor CAU. You can follow this conversation, hashtag Hack Housing, that has been happening on Twitter. Please respond to the emails, we're going to reach out. There will be another one of these sessions happening in the fall. So we want to thank you all for coming today, and I don't know if Gail, you just want to give some any remarks. No, so thank you so much. That is absolutely amazing. That rarely happens. So thank you so much. I think there's no more pizza left over. It's a little cold at this time. But thanks again for coming, and please expect emails from us. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you for coming.